am going to bring in my guest. I am joined with the man himself, Jerry Gray. How you doing
Hi,
today?
Gino.
You doing all right?
Good. Thank you. Thanks for the
So,
opportunity of coming back to your show. It's always fun.
oh, thank you for the opportunity of coming on my show. I always appreciate our conversations. I always learn something in these conversations, and you have a unique point of view. It's almost like a fly on the wall watching this stuff in a way that most Westerners won't necessarily get the chance
I'm not sure that
to
it's
view.
unique. It's certainly different to a lot of people in the West. It's not unique in China, though.
I don't mean unique. Okay, I guess I said that poorly. I don't mean unique in the sense of an out there point of view. I just mean you have a window into something that most of us don't have. Like I've never lived in China. I've been in China for all of 12 hours at the most. So there's no way for me to kind of just sit and soak in what it's like. I can tell you what Malaysia's like. I can tell you what Indonesia's like. I can tell you what all sorts of places is like. China, not so much. But you do. You were raised in the West, and now you're there, and so you can see it with a certain lens and communicate it in a way that many people can't. And so, no, I appreciate your capability in doing it for one, but I appreciate you coming on my show. A second, um, we have been watching a hell of a military parade,
Yes.
and it has been Victory Day, as we like to call it. I mean, first we got the one in Russia, which was a barn burner, and now we're getting the one in China that is also a barn burner. Just for the audience, just in case you missed some of the splendor of this, I'm going to play just a small part of this. Like we were treated to amazing precision, marches, military equipment, all sorts of stuff. But one of the most interesting things we got out of this, not to mention SEO, since both of these things kind of dovetail into one another, had to do, and part of the thing I think is probably most interesting, is China's vision of the world. And what I mean by this is Xi Jinping put out this notion of global governance initiative, and he based it on 5 cornerstones: adhering to sovereign equality, abiding by international rule of law, practicing multilateralism, advocating for people-centered approach, and focusing on taking real action. And I guess I preempted this. Let me go back first to a first question before I get to this. What was it like being there during this parade when you were talking to people, or if you had the opportunity to speak with some of the people around? How were they experiencing this?
I wasn't at the parade. I wish I was. I did a live stream from the parade, but I wasn't actually there. I was in a TV studio in Guangdong, which is 2,000 something kilometers away. So whilst it looked like they did some very clever work, they invited me in. I was a little stunned by all of this because I'm just me. I'm a normal guy who lives in Guangdong. And I have friends who work in Guangdong television station, and we have done some stuff together where they've invited me across to be a host on a show or something like that. So, it's not like I'm unknown to the station, but they invited me in to do this live stream. And I thought, wow, this is not only exciting, but it was extremely, for me, nerve-wracking. They got an expert to come and sit with me who flew down from Beijing. And he's a man I have met, Ina Tangen. Ina is really an expert on China. I am an expert on living in China, if you like. I don't like the use of the word expert at all. I'm just a guy who lives here and has a different perspective to how I used to have and how many do. Yeah. So Guangdong Television invited me into their studio, and I thought that was it was a great honor. B, it was a shock more than anything else. And C, for me, it was extremely nerve-wracking. I put on a tie and a shirt and a jacket and pretended I was getting married or something, and went along there with all the due formality. And I had a few talking points, and I've done a little bit of research and sat down with Ina, who is just, you put any question to Ina about China and he's got the answer, and he's got the stats, he's got the numbers and the figures. He's just a genius at it. So in that respect, I was very happy that he was there with me, but I was quite nervous about this. And then they did some magic, which made it actually look like, at one stage, it looked like I was on the stage with Xi Jinping. I was nowhere near him. I'm 2,000 kilometers away. But it looked like I had front row seats to this, and I didn't. I was on the other end of a camera. It was very clever editorial work. The worst of it is it's now been blocked by YouTube. I'm
Why?
trying to get a copy. Yeah. Guangdong Television, in their haste to get all of this done, didn't seem to get permission from CCTV to use their live feed on my
Oh,
channel.
really?
Now, had they put this onto Guangdong Television's channel, that would have been no problem, I don't think. But they didn't. They live streamed it to my channel, which, again, that was a shock to me. Why live stream it to my channel and not your own?
That's
Invite
great,
me
though.
in to host it, but it was a really big shock. I was stunned by the privilege that I was given by live streaming such an important event from inside of a provincial television station.
Right.
So putting all of that aside, it's now being blocked by YouTube, and we're hoping to get it back. But I will get a copy of theirs, and I'll put it onto a different platform that doesn't have such strict guidelines. And I'm not sure if it's YouTube that's blocked it because it's China, or if it's
That's CCTV.
CCTV that have put
Yeah.
a blanket block on all of their footage, so that BBC, CNN, and all the usual suspects can't pull it up and say, "Look how bad China is, how threatening
Yeah.
they are," that kind of thing. So we're trying to find that out now. But just about this time yesterday, I was busy responding to comments on this. I had quite a few thousand views. I think it was 7,000 views in the first 3 or 4 hours, which is for me pretty good.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, it was gone. And I can't answer this question, so I refreshed my page, and it said, "This channel, there's a copyright claim on this, and you can't have it anymore." So YouTube have put me out of the channel because of a copyright claim. So I'm assuming CCTV have said this footage belongs to us. Anyone using it must be stopped from using it. So I'm out.
I do accept that.
Anyway,
I do accept
it
that.
was a really, really interesting. You're right about the precision. I've spoken to a lot of people since. A lot of people have said to me, "That was fantastic." And I got a lot of my friends watching it, and it was really, really fantastic show. Um, I've just lost
Well,
you there. I
no,
assume
no,
you're
I'm here.
still
I'm
there.
here. I'm here. I
Okay,
was
okay.
just giving you the main screen.
Give me the
I'm
screen.
here.
Okay, I just thought
I
I'd
was just
lost
giving you
you
the main
for a
screen.
moment. Okay.
You know.
Yeah, so the precision, there's actually a couple of really good videos going around Chinese social media. I can send you a link afterwards if you want to link it in the description of one
Okay.
which is purely Chinese. And it shows the soldiers leaving the square, 2 or 3 kilometers out. And this is where normal people live. And they've just got their cameras out and started filming. And the precision remained all the way out of
Really?
the square. They're lockstep. They're actually jogging, lockstep jogging away from Tiananmen Square so they can clear the square as quickly as possible. And it really is that aspect of it is amazing because of the precision being. I've been on a lot of parades. I used to be a police officer in the UK, you know that. And I've been on the beating, the retreat, the trooping of the color, all of these kinds of things that are very ceremonial, the changing of the guard. The moment you get out of sight of the cameras and the tourists, it's like, it's all over. Not these guys. 3 kilometers down the road, they're still trudging and doing their thing. So yeah, it was a really, really high precision event as far as China was concerned. There was some really interesting weaponry there. Now, one
Hmm.
thing we need to understand is China does not show its top quality stuff. It's
Oh,
showing what
yeah.
last year's technology, and some of the stuff there would really, really worry any potential adversary. And I
Yeah.
think the purpose of this, and I wrote about this just before the event. I wrote an article, I made a video of myself about a week or so ago, a week or so before the event, basically saying that I felt that this was not a warning to the West. It's not meant to be a warning to the West. It's a reassurance to China and Chinese people, because nobody really outside of China and other Asian countries, Malaysia would have experienced this. The Japanese horrors, the atrocities that the Japanese committed have never been atoned for. There have been
Right.
some half-hearted apologies. There's never been an atonement like there was in Nazi Germany, where they said this is not going to happen again. There was an atonement. There was laws written to prevent it ever happening. Japan hasn't done that. Japan has just basically whitewashed it now and said there was an incident, and we had to defend ourselves in Nanjing. What they didn't say was that 300,000 civilians were murdered in Nanjing. I don't know how many tens of thousands were raped, tortured, imprisoned. 300,000 were dead. Now, let me put that into perspective. 300,000 people. the war that United States entered in the Pacific Theater lasted 4 years, and they lost 102,000 men.
Yep.
102,000 soldiers over 4 years is horrific. It's a terrible toll. In 6 weeks in Nanjing, the Japanese murdered 300,000 civilians. There's a bit of perspective that is not often remembered now, particularly now. And the rape of Nanjing was just one event. My own city, where I live in Zhongshan in Guangdong, was firebombed. I don't know how many people died, but I actually know people who have heard the stories from their parents who remembered it. Their parents, I think, are pretty much all gone now. I've never met somebody who was here, but I've met people who are the children of people who were here, including my own in-laws. My mother and father-in-law were here and alive at the time, but they really, they're in their 80s now. They don't remember it. They were just too young. They were babies. But their parents knew it. So they knew what happened during the Japanese invasion of China. And the other thing that people tend to forget is it didn't start in 1949. It didn't start in 1941. It didn't even start in 1937. It started in 1931. So the Chinese defense of its own country was actually 15 years, not a 5 or 6 year war. It was a 15-year war. And that was the end of previous problems. Now, many people don't understand this. China lost Taiwan. China lost northeast China, what they call Dongbei now, it was called Manchuria. And the Qing dynasty that came from Manchuria went back to that region. The Puyi, the last emperor, was actually appointed emperor by the Japanese of the area where his family came from, Manchuria. He was a Manchu. He was not a Han Chinese, one of the ethnic minorities. So effectively, people have forgotten this. There were 46 different parts of China that didn't belong to China. Everyone knows about Hong Kong and Macau. Most people know that Shanghai had its concessions. They called them concessions. But did they know that there was a French concession, a British concession, an international concession, an Italian concession? Each of these parts of the city of Shanghai, which was a huge city, were not China. You needed authority to go in there if you were Chinese. You were not allowed to enter parts of your own city. So effectively, this was part of British territory, Italian territory, French territory, American territory, if it was the international concession. The same thing happened in Shandong, in Wuhan, in Chongqing, not Chongqing, several other cities, a lot of other cities all had these concessions. Now, one of the other things was, at the end of the war, the KMT was negotiating with the United States to bring these concessions in more. So there would have been more places, for instance, in Guangdong, where I live, there would have been places that belonged to America, places that belonged to France, in the same way that Berlin was divided and Germany was divided, in the same way that other captive places were divided. The KMT was negotiating with the American government to do that inside of China. It would have benefited China, they said. Well, the Chinese people didn't agree. And that was part of the reason why the Civil War had to be won by the Communist Party, because the people of China didn't want to have their country divided up. They wanted Hong Kong back. They wanted Macau back. They wanted Taiwan back, which had been given to the Japanese in the 1880s or 1890s because of a war that Japan won against Russia in China in a place called Port Arthur. A British named port was fought over by Russians and Japanese. And when the Japanese won, the Americans negotiated for them to keep that and get Taiwan as well. How does that happen? So, yeah, long-winded explanation. China wanted to show the Chinese people this is not going to happen again.
Yeah, never again. Effectively, this century of humiliation will never happen again. And I don't think people in the West fully get that. Like, because I would tell you, in the West, the war started in 1939. That's the way they talk about it. We have video games, 1939 to 1945. Like, they ignore the Chinese portion of that war. They talk about German atrocities. They don't talk about Japanese atrocities. These things are just
most of the Japanese atrocities that they know about. We see movies like Bridge Over the River Kwai, those kinds of things. They were 1941 onwards. It was after Pearl Harbor that the Japanese invaded Hong Kong. They invaded the Malay Peninsula. They were in Singapore and what we now call Malaysia. So they were in Burma. They didn't go into Thailand, but they wanted to build a bridge into Thailand. And they were taking the oil and the resources from those places to feed their war in terms of resources and in terms of people as well. They were enslaving people. They were prostituting people. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese, Malays, not Thai, sorry, Burmese, as they were then, Myanmar now, and Koreans were forced into this comfort woman role. The Japanese now say, oh, they wanted to do it. Nobody wants to prostitute themselves. You may do it because you can survive that way. It's not something you want to do, I don't think.
See, that's kind of the point that you made, right? With Germany, there was for lack of a better term, a come to Jesus moment, an acknowledgement of Nazi crimes and Nazi actions. It is a very throwaway thing to say, yeah, all of these women that we raped and we put into a comfort women camp process, they wanted it. They decided to do this. It's a throwaway.
They decided to serve as Japanese soldiers. No, I don't think so.
Yeah. It's not. It's
20 of them a day, 30 a day. Who would want that? I mean, it may be a case of you would choose that over death. You would choose that over having your children put to death. That's your choice. That's not a choice at all. I mean, this is subjugation, and it's horrendous. And the stories, if you understand and read the story, and that's not even the half of it. There was biological warfare. There was medical experimentation going on. China has just released a movie about the Unit 731, which is only one. There were several, but it's still there. It's a museum, and I've been there. It's stark, harrowing, and a very uncomfortable place. Unit 731 was a biological experimentation camp where they just herded, like a concentration camp, herded people in there, and then experimented on them with things like the bubonic plague. Even when they left China, after the war was over, they didn't know what to do with these infected rats that they had. So they released them into the wild. And after the Second World War, for the next 5 or 6 years, China had to fight a bubonic plague that had been released by the departing Japanese. And it's just horrible stories like this. And they're real stories. They're not made up. These are real. They're people who have lived through this experience and written about it. And it's completely and totally researched. Even Japanese media has reported on this. There was a competition between two soldiers over who could chop off the most heads in a day in Nanjing. This is real. This is not Hollywood. Hollywood has whitewashed all of this and said, the Americans were heroes. Yeah, I'm not disputing the Americans were heroes. I'm not disputing the Americans sacrificed a lot. They sacrificed 102,000 men. That's a huge amount for any country. But the point is, it pales into insignificance next to what happened to China. And that's what the point of this whole thing was about. Now, can we go back to where you started, where you said Xi Jinping has made these statements?
Well, real quick, let's stay here just for 1 second. 25 million people dead compared to the 100,000. America lost, 450,000 over the course of the entire war. Yeah. China lost like 25 million people. I mean, maybe some
million, I think is a more accurate, but yeah. Of those, 30 million of them were believed, 30 million were lost, 5 million civilian, 5 million military, and up to 30 million civilians. Some people have estimated as high as 36 million. Let's go with the bottom estimate of 25 million. It beggars belief. And what Xi Jinping has said actually mirrors the Charter of the United Nations.
It does.
He's not asking for change. He's not asking for anything to be different or better. He's asking for the world to comply with what the world agreed to at the end of this last major conflict that did kill hundreds of millions of people. I mean, we don't know how many Filipinos or Indonesians died. That was an interesting thing. The president of Indonesia jumped on a plane in the morning, came to this show, and then went home in the afternoon because he's got his own problems down there, which the Americans seem to be very much in charge of right now, organizing this thing. We can see USAID and we can see NED all over this. And I actually did something this morning which proved that. Brian Boletic is writing about that, and I found a link for him which showed that the ABC in Australia is funded in that region by the National Endowment for Democracy and the George Soros Open Societies Foundation. So
It's
we just got
ironic.
all this thing
I'm
going
here
on.
now.
This is going on in Indonesia today. They're doing it again.
Yeah. I'm here now, actually. I'm in Indonesia as we speak.
Oh, is that you're in a hotel room there?
Yeah. Yeah, an apartment for all intents and purposes. But yeah, I've been watching the protests as they take place, burning down buildings and everything else, and blaming the students for effectively doing it. Of
It
course,
has all
leaving
the
out.
hallmarks of another Tiananmen Square. It has all the hallmarks of what happened in Maidan in Ukraine. It has all the hallmarks of every single American color revolution.
Yeah. When you talk to the people who are around, do they grasp the gravity of this? Like, meaning, like in Russia, they have the Great Patriotic War. People get it from flesh to bone, especially in the context of the Ukraine war. In China, what do they say regarding foreign policy when Xi Jinping makes that speech about effectively, hey, we should live up to international
You're
law
breaking
and
up a
UN
little,
standards?
Jamal. In China,
Oh,
what do they say about what?
what do they say? Like when they hear Xi Jinping's speech, do they
Um,
fully get that? Do they fully get it from flesh to bone? Like this is our vision of the world.
yeah,
How do they
yeah.
view it?
Chinese people support Xi Jinping enormously. He is a very, very popular leader. I wasn't around when Chairman Mao. I was around. I was 18 years old when Chairman Mao passed away, but I wasn't in China, and I knew nothing. I knew no Chinese people. Didn't know very much about that, so I can't really speak about his level of popularity or otherwise. My understanding as a kid growing up was that the whole of China hated him and wanted him gone. My finding when I came to China is completely the opposite to that. Most of China reveres Mao Zedong. They go to his hometown and they lay wreaths to this day. There is a permanent queue outside of his mausoleum to pay respects to him. This is not propaganda. This is the real feelings of the Chinese people. Now, I would go so far without, this is anecdotal, purely anecdotal, just me talking. I'd go so far as to say that Xi Jinping is at least as popular as that. So when Xi Jinping passes away, and I hope that's not for a very, very long time, he is going to get the same sort of reverence that Mao Zedong has today. I've been to Mao's hometown twice. On each time I've been there, it's been packed. Once was a Sunday, you'd kind of expect that, and once was the middle of the week. And there are literally hundreds of people a day, every single day, laying wreaths at his home and at his statue, which is in his hometown. So for sure, what we're hearing in the West about Xi Jinping is isolated, the people are afraid of him, that's complete, total rubbish. No one is afraid of Xi Jinping. He's not isolated at all. Isolation looks very different when you look at the pictures of the number of people who were in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meetings and who came to the show on Wednesday, yesterday. So isolation is not the word I would use to describe Xi Jinping or his position. People in China respect him, they revere him, they're obedient to him, if that's the right word to use, because they believe that he's led China in a very good way to a good position. He's one of a string of leaders, one after the other, who have all done a pretty good job. Now, with each one of them, you might find some criticism, but none of them you'd find a place where anyone would say, let's get rid of this guy. I haven't seen that. I haven't heard of that. Now, Deng Xiaoping in 1989, maybe there were some people who thought that, but we know for a fact that George H.W. Bush was in Beijing organizing this. We know for a fact that Nancy Pelosi came over here a few days or a couple of weeks after the event to kind of rescue some people and do a little bit of damage control because it went wrong. We know for a fact, we know, those of us who've researched it, that what did go wrong was nothing like what was reported to have gone wrong. The number of people who died in Tiananmen Square was low, 200 and something. That's too high, but it's much lower than the original 10,000 estimate. The number of people who died who were protesters is almost infinitesimally lower than the anticipated or expected numbers. The people who died were soldiers and policemen, mostly. So we know that for a fact. So we know that Western media have been misleading us for 35, 40 years on this particular thing. Why would they tell us the truth about anything else? The people of China believe and support what Xi Jinping is doing. The people of China don't have any animosity towards people like you. You're an African, you're a black African, and you would come to China and people would be friendly and welcoming to you. 99%. And you might get one a-hole who is not nice to you, but so would I. So would anybody else. That guy is just a person who is an a-hole. You're not always going to get 100%, but almost every single person in China, despite what America are doing to China, they don't hate the Americans. I have American friends, and they're a little bit embarrassed about saying, I'm an American. Why would they be embarrassed about it? Because they're embarrassed about what their country is doing. I've got one friend who wears a Canadian flag. He's an American, but he wears a Canadian flag on his backpack, and he's got some Canadian stuff. He always carries, I'm a Canadian. He's afraid to say that he's an American. But the fact is, even my American friends get treated very well by our Chinese friends. There is no animosity towards a different country. There's animosity towards that country's government and towards that country's policies, but not towards the individuals. That's not China's way, and it's not the Chinese people's way. And that's all Xi Jinping is asking for. He's asking for, can we look at the United Nations Charter and abide by it? Can we look at the international laws that exist and abide by them? Can we look at the World Trade Organization and see what rules it has and say these are good rules, or change them if they're bad, and abide by them? Can we look at navigation, freedom of navigation, and say this is what should happen because UNCLOS actually has good laws? But the Americans refuse to accept the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the World Trade Organization, the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. They won't accept anything. And all China is asking is, let's look at the laws that we have in place, and everyone should abide by them. And until they do, then I'm going to keep asking for not change. Xi Jinping's not asking for change. What he's asking for is the reality of the United Nations Charter, the World Trade Organization. He's asking for all of the things that international norms should be adhered to, get adhered to. Let's go back to the United Nations Charter. Venezuela is a country, it's a sovereign nation. And now there are 4,000 US Marines sitting off the coast. There is a rule of law that says a person is innocent until proven guilty. But just today I saw they bombed and killed 11 innocent people. Now they say we have intelligence that suggests that they're trafficking drugs. They killed 11 people in a boat coming out of Venezuela going north. And they said, these are drug dealers, let's kill them. Now, I don't know what intelligence they had. It might have been very strong. It might have been incredible intelligence. This is the one. But the point is, those guys are entitled to due process. They're dead.
This marks the
They're
first known
entitled to due
operation since the
process. What
Trump
happened to their
administration's
innocent
recent
and proven
deployment of
guilty?
warships to the Southern Caribbean.
And that's,
Trump said the U.S. military had identified the
there you go. That is what Xi Jinping is asking for. The American government has amendments to its constitution that provide for due process, and they won't even provide that due process to their own people, let alone these terrorists that they suggest. So you can see why she is upset at America.
Yeah, for one, we have no idea. I was trying to silence that video, and for whatever reason, the thing went silence. We don't know anything about that boat. I don't trust Donald Trump as far as I can throw him. And the fact of the matter is, he just murdered 11 people. The notion that the U.S. defines, well, we're on somebody else's coast, and we've just murdered people. There's no legal precedent for this at all. Not in our laws, not on international law.
They've been doing it a long time. Let's go back to Osama bin Laden. They declared him to be an international terrorist, and they murdered him. But in order to murder him, they invaded a sovereign territory, Pakistan, and they murdered a person inside of a sovereign territory. This is not international law. This is a rogue nation acting as it chooses in order to suit its own needs. Now, its needs might have been to get this guy, but then they needed to deal with the Pakistan government and get him. Now, if there was difficulties in that, what did they do? They overturned the Pakistan government a few years ago, and the most popular Pakistani prime minister, President or prime minister, I'm not sure, Imran Khan, is in prison. He's rotting away in prison now. He's the most popular leader that Pakistan has ever had. He led their cricket team to great victories, and he led their country to a great position. And because of the Americans, he's in prison now. So interference in sovereign states, due process is ignored. It just goes on and on. Every single international norm is at the whim of the president, who says, I declare a national emergency, I'm going to do this. And even the courts, his own courts, are saying, no, you can't. And he's, well, I'm declaring a national emergency, so I can. So who makes the decision that this is a national emergency? And who makes the decision that this is a war and he can kill who he wants to kill? I don't know the answer to that, but he's doing it.
Jerry, this is not just the US. All of Europe goes along with them. I mean, you basically have a country or a group of vassals in Europe, Japan, South Korea is a little more dodgy, depends on who's in South Korea, Australia. All of these countries follow, for the most part, in lockstep under this idea of Western imperialism and Western exceptionalism, that they are somehow cosmically, morally superior culturally, and that they are the quote unquote good guys. And so if they murder a bunch of people in a boat, that's fair game. If they committed genocide, that's fair game. If they invade nations, that's fair game. Meaning, from my point of view, there is no such thing as international law. You can't have international law in a context where 15% of the globe just completely ignores international law, which is strongly why I suggest Xi Jinping is sitting here saying, these are the things that I want to do, which effectively is just what we should be doing anyway.
It's not just Donald Trump. Biden did it before him, and Obama did it before Trump won, and so on all the way back. It probably goes all the way back even beyond Kennedy.
It does.
I mean, let's be honest. America, since the Second World War, has been a rule and a law unto itself, and it's just got worse. I mean, there were standards before, and those standards have been eroded. And each time a red line is crossed, it's turned into a blurry area behind them, so they can move on to the next red line and do something even more atrocious. I mean, they literally are preparing. The Secretary of Defense today was telling Fox News that we are prepared if need be. It's the president's decision, but we're ready. If they need regime change in Venezuela, we'll do it. Now, that's just admitting to an international war crime. They're plotting an international war crime. That's a crime in itself. Plotting to do this is the crime. Doing it is another crime. It's a different crime. But when you start arranging a bank robbery, you're planning a bank robbery, you're already committing a crime if you're planning it. When you do it, you've committed another one. So there's conspiracy, and then there's the crime.
But Jerry, who's the cop? Don't you need to have a cop to have a crime? I'm serious. I'm being very serious with this question.
You don't need to have a cop to have a crime. You need to have a cop to catch the criminal, or you need to have a system in place to prosecute that criminal. The system that is in place to prosecute that criminal, there are two of them. One is the United Nations, and the other is the International Criminal Court, neither of which seem to have any power to do anything to stop the Americans, or the Israelis for that matter, from doing what they choose to do.
Exactly. So is it a law if it's continuously being violated?
It's not a law if you don't abide by it. Now, in order for the International Criminal Court to become powerful enough to do anything with America, America has to sign to say we agree to be part of the International Criminal Court, or the criminal justice system. The International Criminal Justice System, they refuse to ratify that. Same thing with the UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. They won't ratify it, but they will accuse China all the time of not doing something. And this is the thing that they have. It's like one rule for us. And then they've got a very clever wording. Rules-based order. Whose rules? What is the rules-based order? Where is this written? There are international laws that are written and have been adhered to for years by a lot of countries, except America. So they make up things like freedom of navigation. They make up things like peaceful passage. They make up things like words like the international waters. These words don't exist. They don't exist in any legal definition. They're only in the rules-based order. That's why China needed to have a military parade that made, honestly, the American military parade, the 250-year when Donald Trump was sat in, and I believe Hesketh and Rubio were both asleep. Donald Trump sat there. He was very, very proud of this. It was a shambles. I mean, there
It's
are
so pathetic.
so many Chinese social medias doing a split screen of this compared with this. It is just laughable.
It is pathetic. It was very pathetic. It was very
It was.
pathetic. I am curious on your take on this, though. How does China plan on dealing with this? I mean, you have what I'm not going to call China a hegemon, but it's definitely a power in the world, a
It's a
severe,
superpower.
significant power.
It's a
Yeah, it's a
benign
superpower in the world.
superpower. China
So,
does not exert force anywhere. And people will argue, what about the expansion to the South China Sea? Well, we could have an hour-long discussion just on that. But the answer is no, they have not expanded into the South China Sea. They
I
have
would
actually
accept,
contracted.
right. I would accept the benign superpower thing, even though I don't know if you can be a benign superpower, but I would accept it because I know what you mean in the case of China. But how does
Okay,
a quote unquote benign superpower deal with what is a percentage of the world that is effectively, as you point out, gone completely rogue?
yeah.
There's no country they won't invade. There's no person they
The,
won't kill.
the best way I can describe it is by an old saying: never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. And somebody once said to me, I think it was Ina Tengen a few months ago, actually said to me, "There's no point in pushing someone when they're running towards the cliff." So I think that's probably the best way to look at it. China is sitting back and saying, what can America do wrong now? What's next? And that is a big problem for America, because until China reacts, and I'm talking about reacting kinetically to what America does, then America has no grounds on which to react kinetically back. So America is doing its best to try and goad China through its red lines on Taiwan, through its constant Hong Kong, Xinjiang, Tibet, Xinjiang, as they now call it, and we now call it, because I live in China. Xinjiang is the Tibet area. And we have these four things that America is constantly spending money to try and agitate. The thing is, their audience is getting smaller and smaller. Their support is getting smaller and smaller. We're going to see over the next 12 months or so, at least one or two more countries stop recognizing Taiwan and start recognizing China, because the BRI and BRICS are the only way forward. There is
Yeah.
no way forward now economically with America, because as soon as you start trading with them, they change the rules. Nobody wants to be in an unstable trading relationship with a major partner. And America, for all of their faults, is a major partner for anyone who trades with them. They're the biggest customer on earth. We have to acknowledge that. So nobody wants to trade with them, but they feel they have to. So as soon as they do, even India now, India has been their democratic. India's the least democratic country in the world, but India has been their democratic, like-minded ally that is now going to suffer the consequences of not towing the American line, because India is buying gas. India is buying oil from Venezuela, refining it and selling it to Europe. And America don't like that. India's economy has lifted in the last 2 or 3 years quite considerably. It's growing faster than China. It's growing faster than Russia. Russia is at war and it's still got a rising economy. And if you think about this, three of the top four global economies were in Beijing a couple of days ago.
Yes.
In Tianjin, actually, not Beijing, Tianjin. Modi was
Right.
here, Putin was here, and Xi Jinping lives here. So those three, not only do they have 45% of the world's population, they have the only growth economies in the larger economies. The US is not a growth economy. At best, it's going to register a growth, but it won't be real growth because the people are still suffering. Rich people are getting richer, and so the GDP goes up. People are spending more on legal fees, on medical fees, on school fees, those kinds of things. These are not helping your GDP. Manufacturing helps your GDP. But your price purchasing parity in America is shockingly bad. And China overtook that a long time ago. My 100 RMB will go a hell of a lot further than your $100. So there is that to consider. What's going on here in China with all of this is that Chinese people are sitting back and saying, there's no point in doing anything. 80% of the global population and more than 55% and growing of the global economy is dealing with China. on a stable, natural, environmental, sustainable way. It's all happening. Jason Smith, a friend of mine in Beijing, has just written a book about the poverty alleviation schemes in other countries. And he's listed every single country that China is helping. I mean, helping. There are no strings attached. When China builds a hospital, it says here's a hospital. When China builds a road, it says here's a road. It leaves them there. When America lends you money, it takes away your water rights, your utilities, your electricity, your power. China builds a power station and leaves it in Uganda for the Ugandans to run. So where is the myth of this debt trap? None of this is happening. None of the reality is what Western media is saying. So here's the thing. How did China handle it? By actions, not by words. China doesn't need me to defend it. China will just continue to do what it's always doing. And the people who matter, the president of Venezuela, the prime ministers of this country, that country, and another country, those people know where they can do business. They know where there is stability. They know that where there is security and reliability, and they know it's not the United States. So the other thing about Africa, I don't know if you're aware of this, there are 54 countries in Africa. 53 of them recognize Beijing, and one recognizes Taiwan as the Republic of China. Well, that country, Eswatini, which used to be called Swaziland, is the only country, and it is supported. It's an absolute monarchy, dictatorial monarchy at that. It's not even a nice monarchy, and it's supported by the National Endowment for Democracy. Go figure that one. How does a democratic country like America support a despotic monarch just because they poke China in the eye from time to time? So this one little country is the only one in Africa, only one that does not now have a one-sided unilateral free trade agreement. They can send anything they want to China, and China will accept it freely. China will send stuff to them, and if they want to charge China a tariff or a tax, China accepts that too. So they have a unilateral, 53 of 54 African countries can now send their coffee, their wheat, their beans, their beads, their jewelry, their clothing, anything they've got can be sent to China completely, totally tariff-free. So it's a unilateral, one-sided free trade agreement with the entire continent of Africa, bar one country. So
that's your point. That
at
is
the
your main
same
point.
time,
Yeah.
Donald Trump has put a 15 or 30% tariff on the whole continent. So who are you going to deal with? That is why China needs to do very little in terms of proposals or it doesn't need to go out there and advertise what it's doing, because every single person in Africa knows what China is doing. You know, you've got another 2 billion or so people in Africa. You've got 2 billion in India, or 1.5 billion in India, 1.5 billion in China. We all know. We don't need to be told what China is doing. And that is why China doesn't need to do very much.
Oh, that is such a good point. Oh, that is such a good point. Because, you're so right. It's, you take action. You do things, and people see what you're doing.
You don't need to write about this. You don't need words. You don't need to promote it. You don't need me. Nobody needs me. I do what I do because I enjoy doing it. And I love getting people coming back to me and saying, yeah, but what about? And I give them the what about. Wow, I didn't know that. So many people say this to me. I didn't know that. And don't try and don't call me names. Try and prove me wrong. So it's my regular catchphrase now. Stop calling me names. If you want some respect, prove me wrong. And if you can, I'll apologize for my mistake. But if you can't, then please apologize for calling me a CCP shill or a paid propagandist or whatever it is that you want to call me. I've had some pretty bad words.
It's just reality, right? I mean, you go into a country, you build a military base. Okay, thanks. You go into a country and you give all of these loans from the IMF.
Thing. The military base thing is an interesting one. People keep saying that China's building military bases all over the place. It hasn't. It's built airstrips on a couple of islands, and the word is they could be used to house military. Yes, they could. Yes, they could. But so can Guangzhou airstrip. So can Zhuhai. I've got 5 airstrips within 100 kilometers of where I live, and they could all be military, but they're not. None of them are. But
no, I'm sorry, Jerry. I meant the U.S. will go into Africa and build a military base, whereas you build a hospital, you build a road, you build etc. What they're going to need most? hospital, road, schools, etc. They're going to care about
China
those
did
things so much
build
more.
one military base in Africa. They have a military and a navy base in Djibouti, and it was built with 20 other countries, including the United States, because the shipping that was going through the Horn of Africa was getting Somali pirates and Djibouti pirates. They had a big problem there. So China's pulling its weight and helping Chinese trade, mostly Chinese trade going through there. About 40% of the trade that goes up there is from China or to China. And so they said, well, we've got to do this. So they've built a military base so they can do it. But at the same time, in Djibouti, they've also built a hospital, a few schools, they built some roads, they built a train station, they built a train line. They're building things like this. Whereas America just says, oh, we're going to send troops down there to protect our national, not yours, not the Africans' national interest. This is our national interest that need protecting. So there's a uranium mine there. There's an oil field there. We're going to send Marines. We're going to send. What are Marines doing in Syria? They're 1,000 miles from the ocean. They're Marines. They're ships. They're protecting oil. They're swimming in oil. That's what they're doing in Iraq. There is no ocean there. What are Marines doing? What were they doing in Vietnam? They were killing people. What are they doing in Afghanistan? Afghanistan is landlocked, but the Marines are there.
Yeah. Jerry, you are fantastic. And I know you said that nobody needs you to do this job, but damn it, it's a good thing that you are doing this job. It helps.
I enjoy doing it.
Push back on this propaganda and the nonsense that comes out of it. You will be shocked at the value of you know what they say in Africa thing, and I'll close it on this. They would say there's a scramble for Africa, and the U.S. needs to counter Chinese propaganda in Africa. It's like, yeah, the hospital is total propaganda. And during COVID, they would say China is ingratiating itself through to African nations by giving the COVID vaccine.
Yeah,
they're saving lives.
But the interesting thing about what they didn't give Africa the Chinese COVID vaccines. What they did was they built a factory or laboratory so that Africans could make their own vaccines. Now, that's a very different perspective. America sends vaccines and says, we'll give you these vaccines, but we want your water and power utilities to be signed over to us. China says, well, what do you need? You need vaccines. Okay, well, here's a couple of pallet loads of vaccines, but here's the building materials to build the laboratory where we can make the vaccines. And here's 30 technicians to come and help you to learn how to do it. That's how China operates.
I got to get in one last question on this. Is it countries often have there are, how can I say this? It's not bias, ideologies that the countries work through. So think of a complete example that is not exactly the example I want, but it's kind of in the spirit of it. Star Trek. In Star Trek, they have this ethos of we're going to be good, we're going to be righteous, we're going to be fair, honest. This is the Starfleet way. We're going to go places and help other people when those people need it, even if it's to the detriment of ourselves. We'll do it. This is our ethos. Now, some people said they're in a cult. Whatever. It's the way they think. It's their workable point of view of the world. In the U.S., that's profit. We want to maximize our profit, get as much money as we possibly can. We want geopolitical control. We want hegemonic control, et cetera. That's our ethos. That's the way we look at the world. Is China, as you call them, a benign hegemon, are they looking at this in the context of, is this a strategy to win friends? Or is this just the way they look at the world, if that makes sense? In your time being there, is this like, we need to, we are dealing with a hegemon that is out of control, and we need to get as many allies as if we're playing the game of Go, where we can effectively surround the hegemon and weaken the hegemon? Or is this, no, this is the way we look at the world. If we can help in Africa with the COVID vaccine, if we can build a hospital, if we can build a road, it's in their best interest, and they're going to look at us favorably in the process of doing that, and we have a better world and more connected world in that process. We have about 1 or 2 minutes. Which one is it, from your point of view, just in being there?
It's a great question. China has a very different approach to America. Ideologically, China is communist, socialist, Marxist. It is a touch of Leninist as well. I mean, I'm not an ideologist, and I don't really get into those, so I'm not going to get into that. You know, the materialism and all that sort of stuff. The point is, China wants mutual benefit for all. Now, China, coming from 1949, came from a position of absolute, total destitution. it had no money. 1949, it started helping African countries, socialist African countries. So if there was a socialist country trying to shake off the shackles of colonialism, China would help them, even though they had nothing. So that tells you about their ideology. They really want to help like-minded people. Now it's different. China does not impose its ideology on anyone, and I challenge anyone to prove me wrong on that. There is not a single country that China does business with that China has said, we want you to be like us, or we want you to do what we do. China does business with everyone. It does business with Palestine. It does business with Israel. It does business with Saudi Arabia. It does business with Iran. It does business with everyone. And it says your ideology, your internal affairs are your matter. But we think if you're doing business with us, it's going to be beneficial to us. But it's only beneficial to us if it's beneficial to you and you don't resent us doing it. That's a really important aspect of mutually beneficial trade. You can't have resentment in it. So China is trying to do mutually beneficial trade, mutually beneficial enhancement of lifestyle and living conditions. And at the same time, the United States is trying to say, we don't think you should be friends with China because they're evil. But without giving any example, a real example of their evilness or their evility. I'm going to make up a new word there. So America is just trying to sour the grapes at the same time as China is trying to sweeten the milk. It's milk and honey with China. It's sour grapes and weapons with America. And that's the way I view it. That's the way most of my Chinese friends view it. China has done nothing to hurt any other country in our lifetimes. For a few weeks it invaded Vietnam in 1979. Is that the best they could come up with? America's invaded 150 countries or thereabouts since that time. It's just really a case of let's just stop and hold a mirror up to the Americans and say, who are you talking about here? Is it the people on the other side of the mirror, or is it the people in the mirror? That is really what it boils down to. China is not hegemon. It is a superpower, there is no doubt, but it is searching for equality for all countries, no matter how big or small they are. It's searching for mutual beneficial trade. Harmony, it's its favorite word. Harmonious society is China's favorite words.
Jerry, you're fantastic at this. I swear to God, you are. And you give a damn good explanation to a lot of this stuff. And look, you are, screw people who call you names. You're just talking reality. I've experienced that myself when covering issues like this. You're fantastic. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much.
Jerry Gray, by the way, where can people find your channel? Just so people will know.
Jerry's Take on China, and I've just started a new one called China Untraveled, with a hyphen between the T and raveled. Untraveled, but unraveled at the same time.
You guys may not know this, but he's on a bike all through China. So that is being
written about 40,000 kilometers on bikes in China. Bicycles, not motorbikes, bicycles, all done with pedal power.
Westerner living in and loving China and pushing back on the nonsense that people say about it. Jerry, thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay? Have a good night.
Thank you, and I'll see you next time.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, let's go to our next